If you're someone who is waiting to feel ready before you start pitching the guests or the sponsors that you really want for your podcast, then you're going to love what you learn inside this episode, because HuffPost contributor and media expert Alice Draper joins us back to show you the exact process that she uses to turn rejection into a measurable growth strategy for your podcast. You're going to learn exactly what to do whenever you feel that imposter syndrome coming up, and also how to set rejection goals that lead to more yeses. So if you've been sitting at your laptop with your fingers hovering over the keyboard waiting to send that pitch but overthinking it, or convincing yourself that you need a bigger audience before you can pitch bigger guests or sponsors, but what you really want is to be the kind of host that people say yes to without hesitation, this episode is going to show you how to do it. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Alice, I am so glad to have you back. I want to dig into setting a rejection goal because you've talked about how this completely changed your career. And I would love for you to unpack, what is that, first of all? What is a rejection goal? Why should we have one? And how specifically did that change how you showed up with your podcast and in your business?
Yeah. So going back to my journalism career, which is where I started the rejection goal, I used to pitch myself as a freelance journalist, and I would ruminate over each pitch. I'd obsess over it. So it'd be like, oh, they haven't opened yet. What's going on here? And it's very demotivating, especially when you are new to the craft, to spend too much time thinking about the responses, because chances are you're probably not going to get a lot of responses when you're just getting started. So I came across a Facebook group where there's a group of freelance journalists talking about setting rejection goals. And they shared a spreadsheet and they shared tips on doing this. And I think what really almost altered my brain chemistry was seeing these veteran journalists who were writing for the New York Times and the Paris Review and all the biggest and best publications celebrating rejections from publications that were also rejecting me. And I was like, okay, if they are getting rejected and they're celebrating this, what is my excuse? And so I did a full 180 in the way I approached outreach. I became more focused on output than getting acceptances. And over time, because I did that over the course of about a year and a half, I got really good at pitching because what you're doing is you're tracking everything in a spreadsheet. And so without realizing it, focusing on this rejection goal, you're collecting data. And in that spreadsheet, you can see which ones got no responses, which ones got those champagne rejections, the warm rejections, which ones got accepted. And every time you just sort of analyze that data, you realize what is working and what is not working, and you keep improving the craft.
Yeah, and it kind of takes the emotion out of it too. I think you could literally put that on a sticky note, output over acceptance, and just stick it to your laptop and there you go. Let's just send this stuff, get it out there. Something that I am so intrigued by what you talk about is this idea of building your rejection muscle and actually turning rejection into a strategy for growth. Can you break down maybe, let's say 2 to 3 practical things that podcasters can do this week, walking away from this episode, to start building that muscle and start training for rejection versus avoiding it?
Yeah. What I did with that spreadsheet was build my rejection muscle. And I recommend it for all kind of visibility that anyone is doing, is to do something like that. And the reason is, so in the case of podcasting, and we do this for pitching podcast guests, pitching podcasts to be on, the reason why I would recommend setting a rejection goal for these sorts of things is because I think that they're a great way to start building that rejection resilience muscle. And they're less vulnerable than going to perhaps people and pitching yourself. Because one of the greatest threats, and we touched on this in the last episode, of rejection is being ousted from our community. But what you're doing when you're pitching in this way is that you're generally pitching people you don't know. And so they're not in your community. So as much as the rejections are not nice, they're not as bad as being rejected by someone within your community, which is almost like the advanced leagues. Once you have advanced past the fear of pitching strangers, then now you're ready to go start pitching people. So yeah, I think of it as a muscle. You could also use an analogy of doing a cold plunge. So if you get into a really cold body of water, it's going to feel really uncomfortable, like a shock to the system. But the longer you stay there, the more you habituate to that cold water. If you get out of the water and get back in, it's going to feel really cold again. So like going to the gym, if you train a lot, you're going to start feeling really comfortable with getting rejected. But if you step away from the gym for 6 months and come back, you might find it's just as scary as it was in the beginning, or maybe not just as scary because you have the muscle memory that you've done it before, but it's still much harder than when you were in the practice of doing it regularly. So it's really about getting those reps in, just like we would when we're training.
So because setting a rejection goal kind of leans on reverse psychology a bit, would in this case, the bigger the goal be, the better, right? Instead of saying like, I'm going to get 10 rejections, say go for 50, go for 100, go for 1,000, like set that goal and have that your team set that goal as well. Is there a specific sweet spot number that you would say to shoot for first?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Courtney, which is great, the bigger the number, the more data you're collecting. So if your goal is 10 rejections, that may not be a lot of data. You pitch 10 people and maybe they didn't even see the email you sent them. So you have no idea what's working and what's not working. If you send 100 pitches and none of them land, you know that what you're doing is not working and someone should maybe review it and help you improve your strategy. In terms of a sweet spot number, I think it really depends on where your time lies. If you have a team, the bigger the better. I think, it's all about capacity. For someone like going back to when I was a freelance journalist, 100 seemed like a great sweet spot for someone who was pitching themselves and doing all the time themselves. So that was 100 rejections in a year. I feel like that's enough to really get an understanding. And also I was writing each pitch myself and changing each pitch based on data I was collecting. But if you have a team of people behind you, you could set a much bigger target.
That piece about changing the pitch based on the data that you're collecting. So you're keeping this log, you're keeping track of the pitches, you're keeping track of what people are saying. How can you actually use these rejections to improve your messaging and to use that feedback to refine what you're doing, whether that be your pitch and or the positioning of your podcast versus like saying, oh my gosh, they rejected me and like taking it personally?
Yeah. And that's my favorite thing about the spreadsheets is the data. Because if you're not getting responses, and we're a publicist, so we have spreadsheets for all our clients and we pitch them onto podcasts. If for some reason one pitch is not landed, well, now we know this pitch isn't working. Maybe I'm going to review it. Maybe I'm going to ask someone on my team to review it. Like we'll have a discussion about why is this not working and tweak it. Because if we've sent it like 30 times and no one's even responded, clearly something's not landing. Maybe it's the audience. So when you're thinking about this data, think about, one, is anything happening? Because if nothing is happening, especially if you've sent something like 10 to 30 times, something's not working. Maybe you have someone you trust that can review it. You could also ask AI to give you some feedback. Take it with a pinch of salt. It may or may not be good feedback, but something's not working. If you are getting actual feedback, if someone keeps coming back to what you're saying and saying, for example, you're pitching a service, maybe you're starting a business, and they keep coming back and telling you they're more interested in this other service. Do you do this? And no one wants your service. That's data for you to take on of maybe I should learn how to do this other service that they want. So just taking notes of what people are saying and noticing any trends there. Of course, you can't take on every piece of feedback that comes your way, but if there's a recurring piece of feedback, then maybe you need to adjust the way you're approaching this. In the case of pitching like publications or articles, if an editor says, I am more interested in blah, 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 I will change the pitch and send it to them because I want them to accept me. But this, if you're sending a more generic pitch, you'd look for trends. And then if something lands really well, it's working and you should lean into that. So that's often what we do with our clients, is if one of their pitches is outperforming all the others, well, let's zero in on that pitch. Let's make that the focal point and maybe even ignore the others for now.
Yeah, well, I want to dig deeper into pitching with you because like I mentioned in the last episode, we opened the episode with the pitch that you sent us and how refreshingly specific it was. Do you have a formula that you use or that you follow that you could break down for us to help us get more specific? Because this too, I feel, is a muscle. And if you work with us in Pod Launch, like we are always harping on like how to develop your specificity muscle. And it's literally learning a different language because it's a different way than many of us are used to speaking in everyday conversation. And that specificity, I've noticed, is what can really help you stand out from all of the generic pitches that someone might be receiving in their inbox. So do you have any tips in how to craft a pitch that is specific and therefore is relevant to the person that you are pitching, whether that be podcast guest, sponsor, media, whatever it might be?
Yes, and I'm with you on the learning specificity or training specificity. Something that I've really enjoyed playing with lately is AI. So, what I will do is I will go to perhaps a podcast that is very well known and well respected and has very specific titles. And I will feed AI all of those titles. And then I'll give AI the transcript of a conversation that I had. So, many of the podcast recording apps let you just download the transcript. And I will say, please brainstorm 50 titles that are as specific and as unique as possible that follow the style. And then I'll share all the examples from another podcast. And then AI can give up some really great stuff, some really bad stuff too, but you're now kind of leaning into it. Another thing that I will do with AI is I'll be like, please, can you break down some of the points in this conversation? Or I'll go back and forth actually saying, get more specific, get more specific. But another thing to think about when you're thinking about training that muscle of getting more specific is start breaking down what will I discuss within a conversation or in an episode or in an article or whatever it is, and then see if you could actually make the focal point one of your sub points, because often the subtopics are much more interesting than that big broad topic you're thinking of in the beginning.
This is good. I love finding good use cases for AI because I know, and a lot of our listeners feel the same way, where it's like we don't want to give up our thought leadership over to AI, but we're also all for saving time and creating leverage everywhere we can. And it's pretty funny because I have trained ChatGPT to learn my voice in great detail and also to understand what I mean when I say specific. And sometimes I still kind of like, yell at AI and I'm like, that is not specific enough, and it's like, come back with something more specific. But it does help to get the juices flowing because a lot of times we're so close to what we do that sometimes we can't see it from an outside perspective, or what we think is specific maybe isn't. And so using AI in this case is a great use case for it because it can help give you those threads to pull. Like you were saying, just, when you're collecting the rejections and looking at what are recurring themes, you can spot some of those themes and trends too with what the output is giving you with AI and let it help you brainstorm. I'm curious, Alice, let's say someone pitches 3 shows this week, to be a guest on, or 3 sponsors this week, and they hear nothing back. How should they respond to that silence, both emotionally and strategically?
I think that 3 is not enough data. So I don't think that you know anything by sending 3 pitches, because very easily, I even said this about 10, no one saw your email. They didn't even get to it. It disappeared in their inbox. They read it, thought it was good, and then didn't get a chance to respond. Or they read it and thought it was bad and didn't get a chance to respond. Or they deleted it. You have no idea if you send 3 emails what's going on. So emotionally, I would recommend maybe talking to people you trust and just saying, hey, I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable. I sent 3 pitches and I haven't heard back. I think that can help you get a little bit of a reality check where hopefully they have some good judgments and they'll say, that means nothing. And there's nothing personal about that. I don't respond to most emails, even if I want to respond to them, because I get busy. And then I would work towards a bigger data point and get someone to hold you accountable, because it's much easier if you know that you have the support of someone else. So try sending 10 pitches a week for a month. See what happens then. If you have no responses, then you have some data, which is, okay, I need to make this better. I need to improve this.
What would you say to someone who's like, 10 pitches feels like a lot? I was setting the bar really low, and I'm glad you pushed back on me because I agree with you. 3 is nowhere near enough to be able to make any good assumptions from that. But for that person who is pressed for time or who maybe doesn't have a team, and maybe they're flying solo and they're doing this all on their own and it feels new and foreign and they want to put themselves out there, but they're still contending with these fears of rejection and they're like, I don't even know how to craft a pitch. What would be like the first step that you could give them to say, here's what you could do this week to get you that much closer to being able to send these pitches out and to get yourself out in the way that you need to?
Yeah, I mean, I completely relate to that. And that was me for a very long time. So I understand how overwhelming it can feel. I will also say that setting a small target is going to be demotivating because you're very unlikely to see traction and you'll assume this is not worth my time and you will just give up and stop. So I would really urge someone who's getting started to carve out a chunk of time. Maybe it's 2 hours a week. Maybe it's 30 minutes before work and 30 minutes after work. But you really need to put some dedicated time in your schedule and stick to that time for a couple of months, really, because you're learning a new skill and if you are not familiar with pitching yourself, you're not going to get it right in the beginning. You need to go through this and keep trying. And I mean, that's what I had to do as a journalist. And I'm a writer by trade. I've always been a writer. So give yourself some time to not get it right. Just like growing a podcast, if you're expecting immediate downloads after putting in time, you're probably going to give up if it's not exactly where you want it to be. So I think you need to really focus on doing it consistently for a prolonged period of time and figuring out the right structural support systems you need to stick to that habit.
Do you have any resources for those who are like, I want to learn how to pitch better, or I need help with this? Is there anything that you offer that could potentially help them with shortening the learning curve of that process?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, hustlingwriters.com, and then type in /templates, so just templates at the end, hustlingwriters.com /templates, there's a pitch guide, which includes our templates and also 5 must-haves that you should have in a pitch. And then also you'll be on my mailing list. And in that first welcome email I'll send you, there's a class where I go through a 60-minute class on how to pitch and how to find the right podcast. This is for pitching podcasts specifically. So this is if you want to be a guest on other people's shows, which is a great way to grow your own show. I go through how you would do that, how you would research the podcasts, how you can personalize your pitches. So that would be a place you could get started and giving yourself some time to learn, because not everything comes overnight to us. That's just part of the process of being a human.
I wish it did. Oh, I wish it did, but you were so right. It does not. Alice, thank you for being here today. Given our conversation, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you that you'd love to leave our listeners with as we wrap up?
Good question. I guess if there's one takeaway I would like listeners to take when it comes to rejection is find your rejection community. If you really want to get consistent about putting yourself out there and pushing your comfort zone, I think you need to figure out who those people are that are going to hold you accountable and support you on this journey. And then you're well on your way to pushing the boundaries of what you thought was possible.
I love it. Alice, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Courtney. It was such a pleasure.
And if you haven't already, drop what you're doing to grab those templates. Go to the show notes right now and click the link, because these are the exact same templates that Alice and her team have used to land over 500 guest interviews for their clients on some of today's top podcasts, including Work Life with Adam Grant and many, many more. And if you found this episode helpful, then I would love it if you would scroll down in your Apple or Spotify app, tap the 5 stars, and bonus points when you write a written review on Apple, because what this does is it lets other listeners know that this show is going to be worth their time too. And then stay right where you are, because speaking of making bold moves, I have got a very special guest and fellow podcast host joining me in the next episode to share how she first launched a podcast with a confusing name, hour-long episodes that nobody finished, and a message that nobody was clicking on, and then made a few key changes and hit number 3 on the charts in her category and stayed there for over a week and has been ranking on the top charts ever since. We're going to break down exactly what she did and how you can apply these same things to your podcast too. All of that is coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.